Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
It is the rule of any negotiation that to be able to get a favorable outcome or a reasonably favorable outcome, you should have something to negotiate with. That means you should have some strength, some chips to put on the table. Because if you don't have any of that, then a negotiation basically means agreeing to the outcome that the other side wants. Now, this applies to any negotiation, but most of all to a negotiation of strategic nature between nations, and strategic nature even more between two largest nations in the world, with the two largest militaries and nuclear weapons, with an old history of border tensions, and that is India and China. Now, you may have seen stories over the past couple of days, and because we've been so caught up with Bihar and so caught up with Trump and American elections, etc., that this story has not found sufficient attention. But I'm sure that most of you know that something new has come up between India and China in Ladakh. So one more round of Corps Commanders meeting took place, and it does look like in this round the two commanders also met one-on-one, besides the meetings between the delegations. So from what we know and what you can see from Snehesh Alex Philip's story, which I am sharing with you, Snehesh Alex Philip and Amrita Nayak Datta are our defense reporters. And I will also share with you General H.S. Panag's article today that you should read, because he's been the Northern Army commander and he knows each one of these peaks and all these ridges personally like the back of his hand. He's walked on all of them. Now, what have the Chinese suggested, and what is it that India is now giving serious consideration to? Remember, health warning, no agreement has been finalized as yet. So now the expressions you hear about often are status quo and status quo ante. So my first news editor, who was our teacher in the newsroom, he had taught us to keep the use of foreign words, because English is not a foreign language for us, foreign words to minimum. But status quo now is not really a foreign word, we use it all the time. So status quo would mean as the forces are right now, which means the Chinese on finger 4, Indian forces overlooking the Chinese positions on finger 4 and finger 5 on the higher spurs of these fingers up to 18,000 feet. On the southern bank, Indian side, Indian Army on the crest line of what is called as Kailash range, which we had described to you earlier in detail in a Cut the Clutter, overlooking the Chinese positions, particularly China's very vital Moldo garrison. That is the status quo now. Now, if you say restore status quo ante, we get into more interesting territory, because so far the Indian negotiating position was that status quo ante, that means status quo as it existed before this change. That means status quo should be restored to what it was until 20th of April, when Chinese PLA came and began changing things. Now, if you do that right now, it is not something that will suit India. Maybe the Chinese would like it, Chinese would prefer it. Until 29th or 30th, the night of 29th and 30th August, that would have been India's negotiating position. In fact, if you read General Panag's article today, he says in that article that even his view was that that was a good negotiation strategy, that each side goes back to wherever it was before April 20. But something changed on the night of August 29-30. What changed? You know it, because we also did a whole Cut the Clutter on it. Indian Army actually made quite a dramatic move on the night of 29 and 30th August, when they climbed up to the entire Kailash range. They climbed up to the entire Kailash range. They took all the dominating heights on the southern bank of Pangong Tso. Now, if you see the map, and I'm using the same map that General Panag has drawn and used in his column, if you see this map, then even lay people like us can see that the terrain on the southern bank of Pangong Tso, because that connects with the Indian mainland in a way, is more vital strategically and tactically than the terrain on the north bank. North bank is about a little territory. South bank is about where Chinese forces can come into, where India can stop them, or where Indian forces can go into. So as General Panag says, without going into the detail, that Indian army going up to these high positions on the southern bank on the Kailash range has pretty much neutralized the advantage that the Chinese might have got by blocking India's patrols from going to its patrolling points in Depsang region. Because then if the Chinese, and I'm adding this, if the Chinese threaten you in Depsang, through Depsang at Daulat Beg Oldi, which is difficult to defend. In fact, General Panag has said this before, and it's a well-known fact that that terrain and that positioning is very difficult for India to defend because Chinese have terrain advantage in that area. If that happens, then India now has the ability to go into the Chinese underbelly. So through Spangor Gap, Moldo Garrison, because there is the lake in the middle, Chinese have to come around it. And this is the closest access to China's Tibet Xinjiang highway. And their supplies, their logistics are all connected with the Chinese mainland. So this becomes a kind of quid pro quo. So what this, I would say, quite a heroic and quite a dashing action on the night of 29th and 30th August did was, it gave India a new bargaining position. It gave India a new bunch of negotiating chips, which India did not have then. So the status quo ante that India wanted before 29-30 August has now changed. It has now changed for China, because the Chinese might now say, oh, status quo ante, let both sides go back to April 20. But that also means Indian side coming down from the Kailash range. That is what has caused anxiety among some military commanders, including General Panag, who says, look, the Chinese know the importance of Kailash range. It is as important for India by way of dominating the Chinese positions as the Chinese positions traditionally and terrain-wise is in the Daulat Beg Oldi region. And he says, even in 1962, the Chinese had come up to their claim line, but Kailash range itself was not occupied by them. And it is because the Indian side found it indefensible at that point. In his view, wrongly, imprudently, they had withdrawn from these. And since then, India has not occupied the Kailash range militarily. Now that India has done so, India should not be looking at the April 20, pre-April 20 status quo ante. Maybe the new status quo ante is that this is India's territory. So India will sit on this range. Let the Chinese demand more, and if the Chinese still want you off these heights, then they have to make concessions to you in Depsang. Now, we don't exactly know what has happened there, but this is the position now. India now has a bargaining position. And we have said this to you many times, that Indian army is not a pushover. It's not a faltu army. It's a very tough army which can take attrition, which can inflict attrition. It's also an army with a great deal of expertise in high altitude warfare. So not only did they surprise the Chinese, they surprised the Chinese in a very highly taut situation when everything was under watch. Not in April 20 when the Indian side was complacent. Complacent in the sense that this was a frozen frontier for 60 years. Indian army was able to surprise the Chinese on the south bank of Pangong Tso on the Kailash range in a full warlike alert situation. So the worry is, if India gets off these heights, the Chinese will never let India get back on, because now they know that you have the capability of doing it, and when you do it, you really threaten them where they are at their most vulnerable. Having said that, a fact that is not fully appreciated in India is that the Indian army also on the Finger side, on the north bank, while the Chinese came up to Finger 4 and a little bit up on the banks of the lake between finger 4 and finger 3, the Indian soldiers climbed the high spurs on finger 4 and finger 5. In fact, if you see the map, those spurs then combine and it becomes one kind of high region. So, Indian forces went up there up to 18,000 feet, almost carrying out a mountaineering kind of operation. That is where the tensest moment post Galwan clash came. That is where the two sides exchanged quite a bit of firing, although without hurting anybody. I presume warning fire from both sides. Several hundred rounds were exchanged there, because the Chinese also knew that once the Indians were on the higher altitude there, they were threatening the Chinese positions on the spurs of the same finger. So, once again, there was a negotiating chip there as well. So, India is now not negotiating purely from a position of weakness. First of all, it suits both governments if the armies can come back, because no government can afford war. For India, it's a crisis situation in so many areas. For the Chinese, the diplomatic, military and political consequences of this will be phenomenal. And also they know that while India has disadvantages in terms of defending the terrain in Ladakh, India can inflict quite a lot of attrition that the Chinese would want unaffordable. And also maybe this will distract them from their priorities, which might be in the area of Taiwan or South China Sea. That's the calculation. So, both sides, it seems, are now keen on disengagement. What is being discussed to understand this? Let me just say that there are 3 or 4 things happening. One, the Chinese want to disengage first, which means create a distance between the two sides. So, we go back to finger 8, you go back to Dhansing Thapa post, your administrative base on finger 3. You don't patrol the area between 4 and 8. We don't patrol the area between 4 and 8. That is status quo ante restored as of April 20. Because remember something, I know that there is an emotional, sentimental thing that India has claims up to finger 8. It's our territory, and this demilitarized zone will now come a buffer. This will be in our territory. But remember, hands on the heart, speak the truth. The truth is that India patrolled some depth into this territory. The Chinese patrolled some depth into this territory. Nobody controlled this territory. Nobody could stop the other. You confronted each other and you went back. So, in a way, this territory was claimed by both but controlled by none. The other tough truth there, and I say this with a great deal of circumspection, you see that road that's been built along the lake right up to finger 4. After finger 4, it's not possible for the road to go because that spur goes right into the lake. Flat foothold is not available for the road to come ahead. Who built that road? Obviously, the Indian side, obviously Border Roads Organization of Government of India did not build that road. The Chinese built that road. So, the Chinese PLA for some reason was able to build that road up to finger 4 almost 20 years back, because satellite pictures of 20 years back show that little road as well. So, this is not territory that India is sacrificing, and if you can keep confrontation away from this territory, I don't see any loss for India. The situation changes on the other side. On the other side, if you say status quo ante pre-April 20, that is on the Kailash range, then India has to figure out that it is effectively coming down from ranges which are in its own territory, which are not in the Chinese claimed territory, but they were not militarized earlier. The Chinese say in exchange they will come down from Blacktop and couple of other positions which are even higher, and they dominate the Spangur Gap, which is the gap in the Chushul region through which heavy armed forces, including armor, can invade from the Chinese side or from the Indian side towards China. So, that is again a trade-off. Is that trade-off good enough? I don't know, but there are commanders like General Panag who think that that trade-off is not good enough for India. India will be, now that India has gained this space, India should demand more in exchange, and the more they would want is the restoration of patrolling rights up to the old patrolling points in Depsang region. So we don't know what the state of play there is. We also know that Depsang is a crisis or a problem that goes back way behind the April 20 date. Because Depsang had trouble in 2002, 2010, 2013, and the patrols have been confronting each other. So one understanding of this new agreement can be that, look, Chinese have effectively secured their 1959 claim line because they may not be occupying territory up to their 1959 claim line, but they have effectively made you demilitarize or create a buffer zone up to the territory controlled by them and controlled by you as in India, and the territory between that which you claim is buffer. So the buffer is at your cost. So that's another way of looking at it. I think it applies not in the Pangong region, but it may apply to some extent in the Depsang region. The reason I'm not talking about Depsang in greater detail is that I need more clarity and I need to get more facts on that region. So what happens once this disengagement takes place, which means the fear of an effect of a sudden conflagration of the kind that took place in Galwan. And please do not buy these stories that Indian troops were sitting there unsuspecting and the Chinese came and ambushed them in Galwan. Galwan was a genuine fight. We'll talk about that in detail a little bit later, maybe some other day. But the fact is that once you disengage, then the danger of a sudden unintended conflagration comes down. Next round then will be withdrawing the heavy stuff, that is armor, tanks, armored personnel carriers, heavy artillery, because that has been hauled up to high mountain ranges now. Again, there are negotiations between the two sides on how far back each one will take its heavy stuff, because the Chinese have the advantage of flat terrain and very good highways on their side. The Indian terrain on the other side is very mountainous. It is connected through one or two very high passes. So India does not want to take its heavy stuff too far back in the rear, because again, if the Chinese intentions change, then it will take much longer for India to bring this back and deploy it in the battle zone than the Chinese. So negotiations are going on how far back the Chinese go, how far back the Indians go. And from my gestures, you can see that Indian position would be that if the Chinese go back a yard, India goes back maybe 3 or 4 inches. So those equivalences are being arrived at. Then the two sides engage on other issues, and maybe then the top leaders of the two sides meet again, and this can have other consequences. Now there are two more things I'd like to say to you in conclusion. If you want to understand the strategic, military, tactical situation between India and China, see a clip from my conversation on the print off the cuff with Ashley Tellis, who's at Carnegie, but who's one of the foremost experts on the Asians, particularly South Asian subcontinent's strategic picture in the whole world. He says something very interesting. He says, look, the Chinese know and the Indians know that in Ladakh, terrain works to India's disadvantage, and it's very tough for India to defend Ladakh against a really determined Chinese push if the Chinese are willing to take the losses. But the picture is very different in the eastern sector. In the eastern sector, terrain works to India's advantage, in the sense the Chinese may come in from the plateau, so they have good connectivity, but India has defense on the heights, and then India has defense in depth, and very formidable defense in depth. In Ladakh, that depth is not available. So remember that push comes to the shove, India has options, and the Chinese know that. The second thing is, I know this is also floating that, oh, because Trump is gone, not yet gone, he doesn't think he's gone, but I think he's gone. Trump has gone and Biden's come in, so maybe India's negotiating position has weakened. So India is not willing to settle for less. This is a whole lot of nonsense, hogwash. I could use something stronger, but I'd rather not, because my editors would bleep me out. That is not the picture. Please do not go by rumors. Look at the facts and look at the track record. Joe Biden, when he was chairman of Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he had written a letter to President George Bush asking for the withdrawal of sanctions put by Clinton administration against India after the Pokhran 2 tests, and he had said in that letter that it's counterproductive. Later, as a ranking member of this Senate and a Foreign Relations Committee veteran, he moved the Indo-US nuclear deal for voting in the Senate. So not only did he vote for it, but he moved it. And just as a sidelight, the one Democratic senator, among a few others, who had voted against the Indo-nuclear deal was a gentleman called Bernie Sanders. So now you know how sensible the Democrats were, that in the primaries they cut off people like him, Elizabeth Warren, etc., etc., who would have been more troublesome for India. But Biden is as mainstream can be.